What's a normal money habit that secretly ruins people financially? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Underestimating upkeep, especially on large purchases like homes and cars. People often mistake budgeting for just saving spending, but true budgeting also includes projecting out beyond the date of buying the thing. The higher priced item of these, the higher the ongoing maintenance for a myriad of reasons. If it's simply sized bigger than something cheaper, supporting upkeep, like insurance, will be more expensive. Also, if you go luxury level, maintenance parts are going to have luxury pricing as well. Answer. People get into this trap with houses, especially today. They stretch so far to buy the house, but then are scrambling within 6 months, a year, 2 years when the roof is leaking, the water heater dies, or the dishwasher breaks because they have nothing extra in their budget for the repair. A house always needs some kind of fixing, and fixing needs money. You need that money. Story 2. One of the biggest ones is inconsistent spending and saving habits. My wife and I are guilty. This week we just didn't have the time to grocery shop. While we have dinners covered, our lunches are not. 60, 70 each person this week. Atrocious. Answer. I used to buy lunch almost every day. It definitely adds up, so now I make sure to bring it with me. Maybe I'll occasionally splurge for a slice of pizza at the cafeteria, but I try to keep it infrequent. Sometimes I'll come down to the cafeteria, take one look at the current prices, and go back upstairs. Oddly enough, I'm no longer as into greasy food as I used to be because of this. Story 3. Not knowing the difference between being able to pay for something or being able to afford something. Answer. I can currently pay for a down payment on a relatively inexpensive house, about $25,000. That is nearly my entire savings. While I can pay that much in a literal sense, I can't afford to spend my entire savings because I'll have no money for any of the other expenses buying a home would incur, any immediate maintenance, repair, utilities, etc., until I get a few more paychecks. It would be unwise for me to spend my entire savings right now. Story 4. Not budgeting for expenses that don't occur on a predictable schedule or don't happen every month. The timing of car repairs can be unpredictable, but you can't tell me no one could have possibly predicted your 10-year-old car needed $500 worth of work. Don't even get me started on people who think Christmas is a reason to dip into your emergency fund. The date is fixed every year. How does it come as a surprise every year? Answer. I'm with you on the Christmas. Not only do they not plan, but they think they need to spend hundreds of dollars on each person and take loans or payments or max credit cards to do it. The amount or price of gifts are also out of hand. Your kid doesn't need 20 things to open to make Christmas magical. If you can't afford the gifts, don't get them. There's no requirement to give gifts to every single person in your life, nor do you have to buy the latest video game system for $500 or fill the whole room with pretty boxes. Story 5. I believe the term is keeping up with the Yancees. That kind of competition drains your bank account. Answer. I know a couple who bought a house in a McMansion development. First, their cars get replaced to better match the neighbors' cars. Then a fancy rider mower because it's an embarrassment to mow an 80x 25-foot lawn with a walk-behind mower. Next will be a camper or boat, like the neighbors. How far underwater do people need to go with loans just to prove they are better than their neighbors? Story 6. Planning to save what's left over each month, which turns out to always be zero. Best move I ever did was starting to pay myself first by having a portion of my check go directly into a savings account at a different bank. Story 7. People who refuse to set up their own retirement plan if their work doesn't offer it. The only way I got through to my friend was telling her to imagine working the same job she now had, very physically demanding, when she was 70, and having to do it not for fun or extra pocket money, but truly for a living. Sobered her right up. Answer. For a lot of us, we're simply unable to save for retirement because we need all the money we make. If I had disposable income to invest in my retirement, I would, nor does my employer offer any resources or matching contributions. This is something on my mind every day, but is entirely out of my control at the moment. Also, TBH, I doubt I'll even make it to retirement age. Story 8. Getting a new car every few years. I know a couple that finance their cars, get new ones before they are paid off, and roll the old loan into the new one. The debt is staggering. Edit. Spelling. Answer. My father-in-law was just telling me how one day I will have extra money and will be able to play the game where it makes sense to trade in every 3-5 years and it's worthwhile. He traded in his truck with like 40K miles and only had to pay 30K for a new truck. My 20K van from 8 years ago is only worth like 4K. I did put probably 5K into repairs, but I think a loss of 21K over 8 years is better than 30K in 5 years. Story 9. Taking out a loan with a longer term so the payment is smaller. Not sure if that ruins people necessarily, but I have seen people trap themselves in some pretty bad vehicle loans this way. Answer: this makes me think of my mortgage payments. I had the option of remortgaging for either 25 or 30 years, and since I'm still trying to save money to upsize, I opted for the lower monthly mortgage payments over 30 years. Every time I look at my mortgage breakdown, it's like 75 interest and 25 actually coming off the mortgage value. Kinda depressing, and not entirely sure if I would do the same again on my next renewal or go for a lower term, higher repayments. Story 10. I do budgeting for friends and coworkers. One IMO is not accounting for every dollar. Let's go to Wendy's for lunch, or I'm getting takeout for dinner, 3 to 7 nags a week. That's $100, $200 a week. Add in subscriptions and Amazon orders, and you're talking easily a $1K a month not accounted for. Everyone had at least $600 a month in these categories and didn't know how they were mindlessly spending on a day-to-day. Answer: whenever I see posts about people door dashing and the prices they pay for mediocre food, I am shocked people are using this service. My girlfriend and I are getting a kebab plate and a kebab pizza once a week from around the block, which is 20 in total. Even that is already a good amount of money if you think about it. 80 a month and almost 1,000 a year. Just having one subscription a month is something I would suggest people do. Watching Amazon, Netflix, and Disney is not feasible anyway. Story 11. Financing cars that they can't afford and not paying their credit card bill in full every month are two of the biggest ones that I see that have been normalized. Story 12. This one is worth mentioning. My 2 rescue dogs cost more monthly than my Mercedes. Animals pets drain your bank account. Not saying it's a bad financial decision. I work with and love animals. However, make sure you are financially comfortable to spend at a minimum $250 a month to feed and bathe them, plus whatever medication, regular blood work they need. Also expect 1,200 vet bills to be regular. Answer: excellent points. So right. Young and middle-aged dogs are not terribly expensive, but they get to be senior citizens way too soon. For the last year of my wonderful Husky Shepherd mix's life, he was diabetic. Vet visits, insulin, and special food treats made him a very expensive fella, but I was happy to have him around. The vet said some people just have their animal put down when they're diagnosed because they can't afford the insulin or food, or just couldn't do the daily injections. I guess I can see that, but no way I was going to put my dog down if he was still feeling good. Story 13. I had a nephew who was always broke but had a good job at the time and no bills. He lived with his grandparents. One time he called me for a ride home from work because his car had broken down and he couldn't afford to get it fixed. We stopped at the bank so he could cash his bi-weekly paycheck. Then he had me stop at a store so he could buy a new game. Then a auto sound shop where he bought a stereo setup for the car he couldn't afford to fix, and multiple other stops. I went along with doing all these stops because I was interested in where all his money went. By the time we got to his home, he had spent the whole paycheck and had no money for the next 2 weeks. He said he got to spend extra since he didn't need to buy gas. He called me later to see if I could drive him back and forth to work for 2 weeks because he didn't have money to get his car fixed. I told him he did have money to get his car fixed, but chose not to, and that he would have to make other arrangements. Story 14. Something that could be ruinous. Marrying and not discussing or combining finances? You're a team now. I know many couples where one doesn't have a clue about the others or their joint money. If things go bad or if one is irresponsible, it could ruin you. Answer. On the flip side, I've seen stories of joint bank accounts ruining people's finances because you have no legal recourse if the other person spends all the money in the account. And there's also some weird thing where if they go into debt, so do you. Me and my partner only have separate bank accounts, and we just regularly discuss how much we each have, and will often transfer each other cash when need be. Story 15. IDK about ruin, but darn, we have partied too hard a lot of money on adult beverage. Drinking your money is such a waste. Answer. Sue, yes, you're right, but life needs living. If I could teleport you to 15, would you never drink? You'd probably have different friends, different stories, different experiences. I'd wager less exciting. Gen Z are eliminate the adult beverage industry, which is great for their health, but I'd wager they are much more depressed and socially isolated. Story 16. Mr. Banker, how much house can I afford? Then buying a house for that amount. A few months in, people realize they have no cash for furniture, kids' sports, or repairs on the car. Mr. Banker, how much car can I afford? Because they bought that big house in a fancy subdivision, all their neighbors have fancy cars in their driveways. Envy purchase. Mr. Banker, my credit card bills are out of hand because everything is so expensive out here in expensive house land. How can I consolidate this debt? I can add it to the house mortgage for 30 years. That's a deal. Bankruptcy declaration in 3, 2, 1. Answer. When I bought my house, we viewed another house nearby that was basically perfect. Very much the one that got away, It was bigger, larger garden, closer to the train station, had more scope to extend, etc. It was also right at the maximum of our mortgage in principal. We could have got the loan, but we were uncomfortable with the repayments and decided not to enter bidding. Fast forward 5 years, and the increase in interest rates since then would have eliminated us on renewing our mortgage term. We would have had the perfect house, but I suspect we'd be suffering from crippling stress and probably marriage problems, trying to raise 2 kids and pay a mortgage with no money for anything else. Story 17. Storage lockers. I know it doesn't necessarily ruin people, but it's just throwing money away. IMO. I realize it's helpful for a few months while in the process of moving or whatever. But long term, if you don't need or use the stuff you have stored away, why do you hold on to it? Answer. Best thing about getting a storage locker whilst moving? It helped hammer home to my partner the cost of space, like holding on to an item that might be useful one day costs money. You just maybe don't see it because you're paying the same rent mortgage, but ultimately larger living space costs more. So if you fill it with stuff, you just have the same space, but are paying for storage. And lots of items become negative value by that basis. They're costing more to store than they would to replace, sometimes by a substantial margin. Doesn't matter if it's a storage unit you're paying for directly or storage space in your house. Same applies. So when I pointed out the storage container at 100 month was adding up, I think that helped illustrate the point about the hidden cost of a storage container of stuff that we haven't used in multiple years that was in the house garage. Also, if you do rent a container temporarily, multiply your expected duration by a factor of 4. Story 18. People seem to be obsessed with cars. Every 4-6 years, they are dropping half their gross income on a depreciating asset because they need reliability. Cars are one of the largest inhibitors to financial growth. Answer. There's a guy up thread congratulating himself for paying extra on his 17-car loan, $500 a month, so that he can finish it off faster. Like, okay, obviously that's better than minimum payments, but I'm over here shaking my fudge head in disbelief. 17 is critical emergency level interest rates. You shouldn't be doing anything other than paying that loan off. Of course, he shouldn't have even had that loan in the first place. That's absolutely crazy. Story 19. Thinking small expenses don't matter, 5 coffees, 10 subscription, but ignoring how they silently snowball into hundreds every month. Answer, penny wise, pound foolish. I sat down with my son and husband a month ago and tallied up all of the in-app and digital purchases in a spreadsheet and made a pivot table by family member, and it was eye-opening. Even though I keep a general ledger in my head, it's so easy to approve 99C here, 4.99 there, but collectively they make a huge difference. Story 20. Payday loans. I have a friend who has a master's and a $120,000 a year job, borrowing $75 off my broke jerk, grade 8 part-time, $45,000 a year salary because she got into a payday loan debt 20 years ago. I am by no means a money genius, but I will never do that. Answer. Your friend is not borrowing money off of you because of a payday loan she took out 20 years ago. She's borrowing money off of you because she still hasn't learned how to make better financial decisions. There is no reason someone making $120K a year should be borrowing off their friend who makes roughly third that amount. Having open debt to a predatory lender doesn't make that situation any more reasonable. Edit, think of it like this. The payday loan could cost her $75,000 a year, and then she would be on an even playing field with you financially, income taxes aside, because I'm too lazy. Story 21. Thinking about monthly payments when trying to determine if they can afford something or should buy something. E.g., thinking about $500 a month for a new car and not looking at the total purchase price or amount of interest you'll pay over the course of the loan. Answer. Cars are wild to me. I don't know where people got the idea, but it is totally possible to have an older car be reliable. Repair bills are very frequently cheaper than monthly payments in the long run. New cars also need maintenance. Total cost of ownership is almost never lower for a new car versus a reliable used car. My old car had to go to the mechanic for a big repair after a few years of no issues. It was $2K. That's a lot, but it's literally 13 of what I would have paid for a year of payments. Story 22. I never understood this one. Folks who will go to a fancier grocery store to buy the exact same products, quality of produce, and brands that you can buy at a discounted grocery store equally close to your home. I started saving $50 a week for the same groceries when I stopped shopping at the local Kroger brand and opted to Winco instead. Answer: I've given up trying to explain to people in poverty that Whole Foods is out of your price range now and try to hit up the farmer's market on the weekend. Honestly, just eat conventional and make sure to get a lot of vegetables. Another option is to buy organic from a regular grocery store. I really like this butter. Only use it as a topping though, and it's something like $4.50 more at WDF. Last time I went there, like 2017, I bought a 6-pack of gum because it was elderberry and an ingredient was love. Yes, the gum thing is an extreme outlier, but the local grocery store sells organic meat at a much cheaper price. We're talking less than half WF prices and it's the same quality. Story 23. Not having the proper savings accounts. Having a $100K in savings checking in a bank that pays you 0.2 interest, as opposed to having that $100K in high-yield savings, which pays 4 interest. $4,000 is a lot more than $200. For some people, that difference might pay off almost a year's worth of utilities. The other thing is anything with cars and vehicles. Car payments rather than buying a car outright. Also buying a new car every so many years and then just paying more payments on top of that. I had a friend who buys a new truck every couple years, and when he trades it in, he loses 15-20 grand every time on the trade. So really what he is doing is paying 20 grand every 2 or so years for a new truck. He doesn't understand that. Story 24. Ordering 40 worth of food because you're too lazy and depressed to cook the 12 groceries you already bought. Bon appetit. Shame. Answer: that's why I always account into my groceries some easy ready meals or like some frozen stuff of the sort. Sometimes I don't even touch one for the whole month. And sometimes I'm so tired because of everything else going in my life that I'm like, darn, I'm so glad I have this frozen pizza instant noodle spree cooked vegetables mix waiting for me at home. You never know when you're going to need it. Story 25. Eating out far too often. I know plenty of people that scoff at 20-month subscriptions, but don't even think about spending that on a meal 3 to 6 times per week. Story 26. I'm surprised at how often coworkers buy lunch instead of bringing lunch from home. And these are people making 20-hour. Story 27. Not realizing that you don't need those smartwatch plan with phone carriers. 99 in 100 people don't need it. And I've seen people waste their money paying every month, and they are not important enough or are never away from their phone to need that standalone smartwatch line. Story 28. Eating out every day, working in the city. It's amazing what $25 a day multiplies out to, even for a professional. Story 29. Lifestyle creep. Life has its ups and downs, and that includes your financial life. You might get laid off, get sick, or face a family emergency. Your company could fail, or even your entire industry might collapse. If you don't live below your means, maintain an emergency fund, or can't cut back when times get tough, you face financial ruin. Story 30. Having a mental image of what they deserve and spending according to that instead of according to what they can actually afford. It's irresponsible and frankly, pretty egotistical. Why do you deserve a nice car, but not those other people? They're trash and you're not because reasons. Story 31. Hiring servants to cook, clean, and brew coffee for you. 6 a day on coffee is $2,000 a year. 8 a day on lunch is $3,000 a year. 15 a day on dinner is $5,000 a year. For a decade in your 20s, that's $100,000 plus interest. Answer: yes, but you're also forgetting the cost of making as well. It's not a $100K plus interest cost versus nothing. It's 6 coffee at a cafe versus 2 or 3 coffee at home. It's 8 a day on lunch versus 6 on groceries and your own time. Same with dinner. Groceries are so expensive, you actually aren't saving that much by cooking at home anymore, unless you're intentionally trying to be frugal. If you're using meat cheese, there ain't no free lunch, that's for sure. And like I said, your own time and your well-being and happiness has a value too. Story 32. Financial advisor here. Most of my clients are people seeking good advice, so I don't run into a lot of bad situations. But when I do, it's almost always buying a house you can't afford and/or having multiple car payments. A few others are very expensive Christmas budgets that drain savings and lavish vacations. If you can save 20-30 of your income, then have at it. You do you. But if you aren't able to save, then a house and cars shouldn't be in the budget. Answer: 2 of my friends were ganging up on me a few weeks ago about how I need to buy a house and the payments wouldn't be that bad, just a few thousand a month for my mortgage, insurance, and utilities. And I was just like, aren't you the same broke hoe that called me crying the other day because your AC broke and you had to borrow against your retirement to replace it? Didn't you have to borrow money from me at lunch the other day? It's nuts. I know I could get by with a house, but in this economy, I'm 100 cool living in an apartment where my expenses are known and predictable. Story 33. not investing. So many people have thousands in a savings account thinking they're doing so well, but in reality, they're hurting themselves and losing money to inflation. Story 34. Yesterday for my lunch, I bought a sandwich from MS for $4.50. Today I bought 4 bread buns and a tub of sandwich filler from Lidl for $2.24. It's 7x cheaper to make my own lunch. Story 35. Buying things just because they are on discount. Like sure, those shoes might be 20 off ATM, but you wouldn't have been interested in them in the first place had they not. Story 36. Buying tea or coffee every day. Also, having a poverty mindset destroys you in more ways than people think. Story 37. Honestly, the thing that's helped me the most is tracking my every expenditure. It's tedious, but you need to make an Excel spreadsheet with categories: X, food, and subcategories, X, drinks, takeout, restaurant, grocery, and legit track where your money's going. Also important to add any investments and paychecks into this too. Over time, you'll see it start to balance, and it's very satisfying. But most importantly, it'll help you see where you're just being ridiculous and can easily cut down. Story 38. Maybe not ruin, but Amazon. Too many people I know pay 15 mark to have the convenience of 2-day shipping, but then wind up buying things they don't really need. Shipping is usually free for 35 purchases, so I keep things in the cart until I reach free shipping, and that helps me to be judicious on my purchases and take things out when I find them cheaper locally. And I get that it is nice to have when you have a busy household and you can't go to the store every day. I'm just speaking about the people who wind up spending more than they would have otherwise. Amazon is almost like another form of social media at this point, always listening, and they are very strategic on what they show you, and it can become an addiction. Story 39. By a mile. Buying new vehicles thinking they're a better deal than slightly used vehicles because they'll last longer, and then trading it in 3 years later to repeat the process. Answer. I completely subscribe to this. I have always bought CPO 2 to 3-year-old cars with low mileage. I will say that the marketplace is changing a bit, where in certain circumstances a new car may make more sense. I have seen year or two old Hondas and Toyotas that were almost the same cost as new. That is just insane. Also the 3-year-old Toyota with 50K miles and still not depreciated nearly enough. Story 40. Got in the black at 48, now 71, retired, living my best life. Bag lunches, coffee from home, buy food stuff on sale only. Put 3 kids through college, mid-manager type who saved for long haul. Story 41. Using storage facilities long-term. They raise the rent as soon as they can. If you live out of state, try not to let them know that. Otherwise, they will raise the prices higher because they are counting on you to not be in a position to move your stuff out. If it can go into a storage facility, it likely isn't anything you need. You are much better off selling items and replacing them later. I've seen friends literally sink thousands upon thousands of dollars into storing crap that they didn't need or want, but couldn't let go of it. And they couldn't afford these thousands of dollars, but it looks harmless spread out over monthly payments for years and years. Ultimately, they were usually ready to part with these things years later when moving into a new house with more storage, etc. They would opt to donate most of it because it no longer suited their lifestyle taste, etc. Edited for a typo of the they. Story 42. DoorDash, Uber Eats, Caviar, etc. I can't believe how many of my friends come up with excuses as to why they need to order delivery versus picking up, or God forbid, make your own food. Story 43. Buying new cars and financing them, and then make it worse by upgrading before the first one is even close to being paid off. One of the fastest ways to lose money. Answer. I've only ever owned 2 cars in my adult life. Had my first one for 15 years and plan on having my second one for that long as well. From the moment I purchased my second car, which I paid for outright, I've gotten phone calls, texts, and mailers regularly from the dealership trying to convince me to trade it in. One of the callers asked me, "What would it take to get you to trade in your car for new car?" I told them, "Give me new car $1,000 for my time." Caller explained how that wouldn't make financial sense for dealership, but couldn't explain why I should take a financial hit. Story 44. I don't know about ruined, but I couldn't sleep well if I had a perpetual car payment. There are so many people I know make less money than me driving cars that cost a year's income. I prefer to have actual money in the bank rather than payments out my jerk. Answer. Yeah, this is such a problem in the US. One time I purchased a car valued at 12 my annual income due to payout from previous car being totaled. Total loan was 14 of my annual income, but less than 110th of annual household income. Outside that one instance, I've never owned a car valued at greater than 14 of of my annual income. Now that my income has grown, my current car, paid off 6 years ago, is current valued at about 130th of last year's total compensation. My next car purchase will be no more than 14 of my annual income, about 110th of annual income. Loans are always 4-year or less. Vehicles are always a 2YO car. Fudge insanely of income average U.S. residents spend on cars. Story 45. Virtually any sunk cost fallacy in practice. People spend money on something that's not working out but can't walk away because of how much they've already spent. You see this on people trying to flip houses all the time. You might get your money back, but the insane amount of financial stress you'll go through probably won't make it worth it and could bankrupt you. Story 46. Not cooking enough at home and not comparing prices at the grocery store. My wife and I cook at home all the time. We replicate meals we've had in restaurants for a fraction of the cost. You can go to one store and buy chicken thighs, for example, for $9.99 a pound on sale, or spend $3 a pound on sale somewhere else. Since we've been doing this, we saved over $2,000 in the last year in just groceries. Also, renewable subscriptions to things you don't even use. Story 47. Buying coffee every day when you've more than likely got no excuse to make your own at home. 3 a day adds up and becomes a habit. Story 48. Honestly, car ownership in general. Think of how much extra disposable income we'd have if our cities were designed so you could get around walking, cycling, or via public transit and didn't have to shell out thousands every year for car payments, gas, insurance, maintenance, etc. Story 49. Buying a new car every time you pay off the old one. A friend of mine said, I love leasing cars. This way I get a new one every 3 years. He is 70 and is nowhere close to retiring. Answer, never ever buy new and run it into the ground, my father taught me. I drive a 2007 Mazda 3, bought it used in 2011 and paid it off in 36 months. It's an awesome little car that does what I need it to. No, it won't park itself and I have to keep my hands on the wheel, but those things aren't worth $30K to me. When it needed a new transmission for $2K, we happily paid it. We've saved much more than that in payments over the last 11 years. I don't know, story 50. Looking at everything as a monthly payment that fits into what you make a month instead of looking how purchases affect your financial growth. Story 51. Credit cards. The normalization that everyone needs a credit card and a credit score paid beyond your means, it's fine. Story 52. Free shipping for orders over $1,000, and then most items are a few quid under the free shipping threshold. Instead of accepting the 3 shipping fee, for example, people add another item to unlock the free shipping and end up paying 40 more than they were planning to on the order. Not going to name names, but there is an energy drink company and a nutrition supplements company that does this, and it drives me up the bloody wall. Story 53. Thinking it's wise to purchase items on sale or dine out because you have a discount coupon. As my late dad wisely noted after I charged a ton of money on clothes that were deeply discounted, too bad you ran out of money or you could have saved more. Story 54. I think the habit of buying a new car every 3 out of 5 years is the single biggest destroyer of wealth in middle-class America. A current new car payment is what, 750 million? Plenty of people spend that and don't even blink at replacing the car when it could last them 20 more years. Or they panic over a 1,000 repair bill that comes once when the 750 muaho is never ending if they don't ever pay off a car. Buy reasonable, maintain and repair what's needed, and drive it for 2 decades. Story 55. Car payments. I'd rather ride a bicycle than be strapped to car payments again. They're a real-life ruiner. Story 56. Spending money before they make it. Going in debt is a killer. When I was little, we were dirt poor but had no credit anywhere, so everything was cash only. My wife came from a more middle-class background. It took me having to show her why we do cash only in order for her to get why we need to stay out of debt and pay off cars in our home quickly. Story 57. Financing more for a vehicle than you can afford. On top of this, buying an unnecessarily large, expensive vehicle. $60K truck that you commute to an office job in and only using it for truck stuff a couple times a year. Or a giant SUV for your 3-person family. These payments eliminate you in the long term. Story 58. Any addiction, basically. Gambling, adult beverage substances. Yes, it's becoming normal now. Intimacy, hookers, brothels or massage parlors, etc. And these are the more common ones. Story 59. Pets. People underestimate how quickly animal medical bills can stack up when a pet has something medically wrong with them. Particularly people who do not have savings or a lot of income may end up incurring hefty debts through loans or by not paying certain bills when they have to make a sudden decision on whether to let their pet pass away or for it to undergo medical intervention, which isn't always guaranteed to save that pet. In many countries other than the US, where human healthcare is government paid, animal healthcare, however, isn't covered, and new pet owners tend to underestimate how steep veterinarian bills can be. Lately, more so with private equity buying out veterinary practices everywhere in Europe, boosting prices with 250. And even if the animal is healthy, the prices of animal food are often higher than people expect. A large dog, an example, can eat a lot. Edit. Here in the Netherlands, there has recently been discussions about whether laws need to be enacted, which will set a maximum price for veterinary bills, as an increasing amount of pets face neglect due to people not being able to pay for a vet anymore. Chinese and American private equity companies have bought up almost every veterinary practice here. Story 60. One normal money habit that secretly ruins people financially is always paying the minimum on credit card balances. It might seem harmless at first, but if you're only paying the minimum, you're mostly covering interest rather than reducing the principal balance. Over time, this can lead to a debt cycle where you're paying off more in interest than you actually borrowed. Plus, it can hurt your credit score if you carry high balances relative to your credit limit. It's a small habit that feels manageable, but can pile up and cause long-term financial stress. Making even slightly larger payments can save a lot of money and help you pay off the balance faster. Story 61. Only paying interest payments on their credit cards, living beyond their means, regularly living off of credit, basically spending money that they don't even have. Story 62. Credit card charges and interest build up. Pay that off every month and don't buy what you cannot afford. See also auto purchases. Story 63. Not realizing that just because they can afford to buy something doesn't mean they can afford to own something. I used to have a sailboat, otherwise known as a hole in the water into which you pour money. There's a reason they say that the two best days of boat ownership are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. Story 64. 1. Subscriptions instead of paying for things a la carte. Better to pay a little more upfront than pay monthly for something you barely use, don't use, forget to cancel. 2. Thinking that sales are actually a good deal. Reducing things from overinflated prices that no one's paying to the real market price is not a bargain. 3. Spending too much on big ticket items like cars and houses. Should go minimalist on those until one's finances are fantastic. No debt, lots of investments. Story 65. Perpetual car payments. Pay it off and drive it until it's costing you more to maintain than buying a new one. You don't have to drive a newish car all the time. Story 66. Holy shoot. The number of people in this post that don't seem to understand that a solid 50 of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Bunch of people really in here, like 50 of your checks should go to savings. How do you not have 60,000 sitting in reserves? Holy shoot. I make 60,000 a year where minimum wage is 15 an hour, and I cannot afford to live by myself easily. You people need a fudge reality check. Story 67. It took me 10 years to teach my wife having a bunch of debt isn't okay. She said it was normal. It is, but it's also fudge stupid. Story 68. Rent to own. Only poor people do shoot like this, which is why they're poor. They end up paying 3 times the price for a couch that's worn out by the time they've paid it off and have to do it all over again. Also, payday advances. The interest is shocking, and you can't get out of the cycle of borrowing because it's so expensive. It's a losing game. Answer. Those predatory lenders prey on the poor, but that's not why they're poor. It's a lot more complex than current decisions. Being poor is very expensive, and being poor makes people very vulnerable to being preyed upon by greedmongers in every area of life, from landlords and bosses to the justice system and churches. It's easy to judge poverty, but the judgment is rarely accurate. Story 69. Girl math. Buying 2 items so you spend $70 to get free shipping instead of the 1 item that costs $30 with 5 shipping is not saving money. Buying 3 shirts for $50 is not better than 1 shirt for $30 when you only need 1. Story 70. My boss tells me if I could afford my current car payment, I can afford a new car payment. He's basically in perpetual debt forever and okay with it. Thing is, I have no current car payment. Well, not until last month. Story 71. Financing new cars and trucks every few years. Rolling the negative equity from the first into the next. Suddenly you end up owning a used Kia for $1,100 per month and your credit score is 580. Story 72. Spending way too much money on a wedding, starting your lives together and immediately dropping tens of thousands and possibly going into debt. My wife and I just wanted to get married in a courthouse, but felt immense pressure from our moms to have a traditional wedding. We ended up spending around $10,000 if I recall correctly, and most of that was on a credit card. We were able to pay it off a year or so later, but I sure would have rather spent that $10K on a down payment for a house or something. Story 73. Another one, do not modify the bank's car. Instead of getting that 6K wrap and 4K exhaust system and on your brand new whatever, Put the 10K towards your loan first. Story 74. Add up how much one Starbucks coffee costs per day. Add on your pack of cigarettes or your daily vape. Add on 12 drinks at the bar every weekend. Work that out for a full year. That's where your money goes. You are welcome. Story 75. Buying and financing a new car just because the current car is paid off or you're tired of it. I've been guilty of this in my younger years. I've learned over the years that it's a huge money suck having a car payment. My current car has been paid off for 7 years and is 11 years old, and I have no desire to purchase a new one until this one is barely drivable. Story 76. Short-term thinking. I used to think day to day, week to week, month to month, in terms of how much I had or whether something was affordable, but it's altogether more realistic to think of your finances on an annual basis. Budget properly for every conceivable expense that is likely to come your way in any financial year. Whatever's left over from your salary is what you get to enjoy. For me, helped me realize that the things I previously saw as a splurge were actually perfectly affordable. Story 77. Buying junk just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's a good buy. I dislike how people buy something to save a few bucks, then it breaks and they have to buy it again. They've now spent more than they would have if they forked up the extra cash in the first place. There is a saying that rich people spend less money. It's the same for food. Junk food is cheaper, but you then spend more on healthcare. Story 78. Paying rent more than 1/13 of your monthly income, driving a car more expensive than 1/14 of your annual salary, spending 1/110th of your monthly income at eating outside, when there is a huge discount, buying something that is not in your need list, e.g. a new pairs of Snickers at Black Friday, although your Snickers are perfectly fine, and most of all, not organized home. If you don't know where your belongings are, you would buy the same thing again. Story 79. Getting a divorce, or more accurately, not being more careful about who you marry in the first place. Story 80. Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, etc. And it's not just them wasting money, it raises prices for everyone else too. Story 81. If you are fortunate enough to have a savings account, if with 100 or less in it, shop around for bank rates, BOA, and the like, are so big, they don't need incentivized to gain your business. Even their high-yield savings accounts are only at 1. We switched to Capital One and jumped to 3.9. Story 82. Letting a content creator, rapper, or Twitch streamer tell you what the next drip you have to buy is. Story 83. Spending money on things that aren't necessities. Think about if you need something versus if you want, feel it might make your life more comfortable. Do you need that 100 ice maker? Or are you just too lazy to use the cube trays? EBC. I know I'm debating heavily on that ice maker as we speak, LOL. Story 84. Not living within your means? Your parents most likely spent decades furnishing their home, but the kid is wanting everything the first day you move out. Leaving tips for people just doing the job for they applied. Buying snacks when out. Story 85. Never plan on a promotion-raised new job before making a purchase. If you aren't going to be able to afford for 6 months, wait 6 months. Story 86. Getting on the must-drive a nice car payments treadmill. That shiny piece of crap means you are going to have to retire 10 years later. Leasing a car is renting it. Buy a modest car with the minimum of bells and whistles. Then drive it, maintain it well, and run it until the wheels fall off. Then have the wheels fixed and drive it some more. Unless you are in a rusty car area with strict inspections. Then every car is a time bomb, and you are basically screwed. Story 87. Buying a cheap item you have to replace 3 times and spending more than you would have if you'd bought the higher quality item once. Not to mention the anxiety and frustration that comes from malfunctioning, cheap junk. Story 88. Working very hard to pay all your credit card minimum payments on time so that you have a high credit score so you can get a higher limit. Rinse and repeat. Congratulations, you've just won at a game that is a stone-cold loser. Story 89. A lot of people are ruined nowadays by buy now, pay later. Payday loan, unsecured loan from moneylender. Starting May seems okay as amount is small monthly, but slowly it will accumulate. Story 90. The art of taking on debt to pay off debt, a brilliant strategy for never actually getting out of debt. But hey, at least someone's earning interest off you. Story 91. Spending money on something you otherwise wouldn't have spent because an item is on sale or you have a coupon isn't saving money. Story 92. Paying a lot for entertainment as if you can't be happy without it. Subscribing to multiple streaming services, drinking at bars, eating out, going to festivals, collecting Steam games. Story 93. Not thinking about your retirement fund until you're way too old to only just now be thinking of funding your retirement. A good way to think of it is this. Old retired you is present, use employee, and has to be paid a living wage. Or they die in an alley. You pay them now. monthly until you become them. Then you spend it to live until you're dead. How many years of that, counting for rising costs, could you currently pay for? A year? 2? Try 20. Do the math, figure out how much you need to be putting aside, and do what you have to do to fund it. Nobody else is responsible for paying for your life when you're old. Unless you want to count Social Security, which ain't gonna cut it by a long shot, set up your future income now. Story 94. Having subscriptions and using Pay-by-4 as Zip, Klarna, etc. regularly. They pile up and kick you when you're down the most. Story 95. Keeping a balance on your credit card because you believe it benefits your credit score. I don't know if this is normal, but I'm surprised at the people in my own life that to do this. Stop throwing good money after bad. Interest isn't good, folks. Story 96. Buying stuff based solely on the monthly payment. Whether it's taking on too steep a mortgage, leasing an expensive car, people just assume it's fine as long as the monthly payments don't add up to more than their pay. I work with a lot of ex-military folks in my job, and they tell me it's insanely common for a newly enlisted service person to end up with a 96-month, 28-interest loan on a Mustang or Charger because the monthly payments are low. Story 97. Buying fast food or coffee instead of making it yourself. I'm too tired to cook isn't the quality excuse you think it is. If you buy fast food once a day, that's about $50-$75 per work week. That's about $225-$335 per month. $2,700-$40 per year. It adds up fast. Story 98. That quiet habit of upgrading your life every time your income goes up. New apartment, nicer car, more takeout, daily coffees, vacations, and suddenly you're making 23 T's what you used to, but still broke. Story 99. Paying for something via credit card with adequate funds in your pocket, or bank, whatever. Telling yourself, this frees up my cash, plus I'll figure out how to pay it off later. Story 100. Lifestyle creep. Increasing your spending as your earning increases, to the point where you never really get ahead, despite making more money. Story 101. Taking on massive amounts of debt for the wedding of your dreams. It's a great way to ruin your marriage with money stress before you can even begin a life together. Story 102. Buying cheap rather than quality. Buy nice or buy twice. Almost everything most people buy are garbage. Example, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, etc. Most any retail is all crap made in China garbage. But it hurts to buy USA made because it costs 2 times as much, but you'll have it for 10 times longer. But we need that dopamine rush. Scroll, buy, repeat. Instagram and Amazon will drain you so quick. Instant gratification on this little screen you're holding. Lose your time, money, and sabotage your own reward centers in your brain and make real achievements less likely to happen and less motivation. Then even if you can make more money, you just waste more. Story 103. Paying only the monthly minimum on credit card debt. Paying just the min will take over 25 hours to it pay off. Story 104. Payday loans. I can imagine yet they have them available at Walmart in every corner. Someone's getting payday loans. And if they do it every single week, often a single day before actual payday. That's wild to me. Story 105. Ordering takeaways. It's a small, innocuous spend, but it takes away a huge chunk of your disposable income. Story 106. Buying things on sale that you didn't need in the first place. Congrats, you saved 30 on something that cost you 100 of your self-control. Story 107. Auto loan. Always pay cash for vehicles. You can't afford it? Keep saving or buy a cheaper used junker car until you can. Wish I would have learned this lesson sooner. Story 108. Overspending on property because it is what is expected, rather than having more balance and investing more into pensions and savings accounts too. Story 109. Considering the amount of money one spends on something initially as the amount lost, and not considering its resale value, which means also not considering depreciation over its life. People do this with a house, and some do it with cars, particularly when the cars get more expensive, but not with other things. You buy TV, buy couch, buy anything. It's good to consider what it can be sold for when you make those decisions, and how things you do with it during its lifetime might affect its resale value, or what you can buy used after depreciation. For me, I tend to buy things used and sell them before they're depreciated too much. Keeps me with some very good quality stuff in my house without ever spending too much and being able to upgrade again after selling it for a decent amount. Story 110. A normal money habit that secretly ruins people financially is underestimating or ignoring irregular expenses like car repairs, annual bills, or holiday costs, which leads to financial strain when these predictable but infrequent costs inevitably arise. Another common trap is using credit cards for everyday spending without paying off the full balance each month, causing interest to pile up and debt to grow quietly over time. Story 111. Spending like your paycheck already hit instead of waiting for it. Sneaky way to stay broke without realizing it. Story 112. Ruin is a loaded word. Life is about choices, sacrifices. Buy a used car with all cash. Well, you are giving up driving a new leased car, less modern car, more worry about repairs. These are choices, so it's not about ruining yourself financially. It's about trade-offs people are willing to make. One exception is paying for a subscription that is never used. That is a clear waste of money. Answer: this car story is the false one people tell themselves. There are tons of reliable used cars out there. My 2009 Toyota Sienna didn't start needing repairs until it hit 160,000 miles, and even then the repairs are far less costly than a car payment. I have a 2005 Scion with 180k miles on it. We have replaced spark plugs, the windshield wiper controller, and a serpentine belt. That's it, and these are seriously old cars. If you do the research into reliable models, there are tons of 5-year-old cars that will be insanely reliable and 10-15,000 cheaper than a new one. Story 113. Car payments. Everyone needs a car. Sure, but you can get a nice 15k used car instead of that necessary 42k new car. Story 114. New cars, they depreciate instantly. The payments on some are crazy high, and the interest rate can be really high. I once knew a guy, unsurprisingly a MAGA, who had a brand new C-Class Mercedes. Between the payment and insurance, he was paying $1,300 a month. That's what I pay every month for my home loan. Story 115. Just keep trading in your car for more negative equity each time while you continue to get more and more underwater. Story 116. I work in a clinic, and so we can't leave during the day. The majority of the assistants and technicians order takeout for lunch every single day. Sometimes they also send out for coffees, even though we have a Keurig Siffy maker with supplied coffee refills. DoorDash once or twice a day, every workday adds up to a tremendous amount of money over a year. Bringing a lunch from home and drinking coffee supplied by work would make them probably $3,000 more per year. Invested over a career that is giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars at least. Once in a while may be necessary, but I can't believe how much they spend for the convenience of not packing a lunch. Story 117. Having a credit card. I honestly thought it was just an American movie thing. Use debit only. Don't spend money you don't have. Story 118. Buying coffee to go, buying from Amazon. Basically spending money without mindfully thinking if that's in your budget or not, or even affordable. Story 119. Buying new cars and or leasing cars more often than they should. Trucks for guys and purses for ladies. Basically, anything keeping up with the Joneses related. Story 120. Buying something because it's a good deal or it's on sale. It's not a good deal or a good sale if you don't need it. Story 121. Living paycheck to paycheck, even when your income increases. A lot of people start earning more and immediately upgrade their lifestyle instead of building an emergency fund or paying off debt. It feels normal because everyone around you is doing it, but it quietly eliminates long-term financial health. Story 122. Buying things you need, we trick ourselves into thinking we need most of what we buy, or it'll make our lives easier somehow. Really, it just adds another thing to take care of, store, dispose of. Story 123. Buying a more expensive house and car than you can comfortably afford on the premise that you'll make more money soon. Both times that we bought a house, we were shocked at how much the bank was willing to lend us. The last time, it was twice as much as we were comfortable spending. Story 124. I agree that I am lucky, but some of it is to planning. Pay minimums on all accounts. Set aside any extra for emergency fund. Once you get a minimum of 2 to 3K set aside, use any extra to pay the lowest balance account. Then roll that into the next lowest balance account. Continue until done. This process could take a while, but as you keep digging, your shovel will get bigger. Just stay focused. Story 125. Cars, just cars. I ran my budget trying to figure out where my money goes. It's cars. I have 3 cars gas, $400 month insurance, 200 MO, no accidents or claims. Tabs 300 wire, payments 500 MIO, one loan. Repairs 300 this month on a coil pack. I have reliable cars to only have one repair this month. Maintenance 100 MO on oil changes for 3 cars. Washes 60 MO for the cheapest wash every 2 weeks x 3 cars. Paint correction 1K YR for door dings if your car is nice, got to keep it nice. Depreciation 5K year, paid 40K 5 years ago, worth 15K. Do the math, it's crazy. 1600 MMR, not including depreciation. The alternative is to move closer to work and buy a bicycle. Keep in mind that this is 2 people and only one cheap car payment. The average American is buying a new car every 5 years. If I wasn't thrifty, my car payments would be $1,400 instead of $500. I know that something is wrong with this picture. Are y'all not doing maintenance? Are you stealing gas? How is it that my neighbors make the same as me and have 2 new vehicles, one of them a truck? There's a car debt bubble of 2008 housing proportions. Story 126, not starting to save for retirement from day one because you can't afford it. One of my biggest regrets, I didn't realize just how powerful compound interest was until my 30s. Story 127. Pay your bills every month, take your spending money out, save the rest. The correct order is save then, pay the bills, then take the rest of the money as your spending money. Story 128. Credit and loans in general are abused and misused, and everyone thinks it is normal. Credit cards in particular are evil, unless you use one for cash back awards and pay it off every month without ever paying a finance charge. Story 129. Lifestyle creep, the I make more so I can afford more trap that keeps people in a cycle of living beyond their means. Story 130. Lifestyle creep. Just because you now have more money doesn't necessarily mean you have to go ahead and upgrade all things in your life. Story 131. Treating credit cards as a way to borrow money instead of a transactional convenience that you pay in full every month. Story 132. Not budgeting. And I don't mean necessarily tracking every cent against a rigid spending allowance. I mean the money comes in and they spend it until it's gone. Repeat. If I'm super careful, I can feed myself for 30 weeks. I know people who have fast food delivered a minimum 4 to 5 times a week. With delivery fee, that's $15-20 for a single meal. And then they turn around and complain that they'll never own a home. They put their wants ahead of their needs, and when the math doesn't add up, it's society's fault. Story 133. Living above your means. People generally don't realize where their money is going, and just trying to keep up, they are putting themselves into a hole. Story 134. Large car payments, 500 tourist routine and/or compounding prior car loans into new vehicles, not keeping an emergency fund, saving too little for retirement, or waiting too late before getting serious. I've seen these at all levels of income, like folks making $250K and saving nothing for retirement. Story 135. The I'll die young anyway, so I might as well live mentality to justify poor financial decisions that follow them around for decades. Buy that motorcycle, buy the fully loaded car they can't afford, go on expensive vacations regularly. Lots of debt, lots of credit cards being maxed out, probably living a paycheck behind every month. I've seen this a lot with coworkers in their 20s. Story 136. My 2024 Traverse had a transmission go. They gave me a loaner while they repaired it, which took a month due to the backlog. What happens when the transmission goes on a 2010 car someone buys for cash? Story 137. Not having more than one checking account. Have money deposited to separate accounts so you can budget for things like investments or emergency funds. Live off one account and forget about the other. Out of sight and out of mind. Story 138. Wow, 5 hours and no one's mentioned rolling over negative equity into a new car loan? Millions do it every year, and it can foretell financial disaster. Owing tens of thousands more on an asset than it's actually worth is never a good idea. Answer: I drive a 2014 Hyundai Elantra. It burns oil and freaks out if I push it past 2,000 RPMs. My husband and I work together and have an hour-long commute. We take back roads so we don't have to accelerate quickly. Other than that, the car's fine. We could buy a new one in cash if we wanted to, but we don't want to. Yes, I understand we are a little crazy, but we will also be retired before we are 50, so there's that. Story 139. Folks buy a SAT that they don't need. They get the dopamine hit followed by a downer. Repeat the cycle to get them out of that feeling of being depressed. It's okay to be bored and content. Story 140. Not getting the full pension match from your employer where available. It's literally free money. In fact, not learning about workplace pensions in general costs people tens of thousands or more over a career. Story 141. Keeping large sums of money in a basic savings account. It doesn't earn enough to make it worth it. Not paying yourself first, pay your bills, pay into a savings or retirement plan, and if there is only $100 left over, then that's all you have to work with until the next payday. Story 142. Buying a new expensive car or truck because they want something reliable or in case they need to haul stuff once a year. Story 143. This will be an unpopular answer for several more years, but plowing all of your retirement funds into index funds. Story 144. Constantly having a car payment. The best financial flex is driving a 10-year-old paid-off car you have no intention of replacing. Story 145. Thinking getting a degree will help you get ahead when it turns out it's virtually worthless. Everyone has one and will make you poor for most of your life. Story 146. Thinking of your tax refund as free money instead of realizing you just gave the government an interest-free loan. Story 147. Only putting in the default 401k contribution, usually like 3 for the first year. Even plans that have automatic 1 annual increases. It will not be enough and you'll be pissed at yourself in your 50s for not realizing it earlier. Story 148. Not saving something from your paycheck. No matter what, i.e. PPL will never go without X item but can't make that commitment to put Coney away. Even 1, 5, 10 minimum away. Plus they know and or feel comfortable enough, knowing another check will come next pay period, so it's okay living paycheck to paycheck. Perpetuation of scraping by. Story 149. Want versus need. Not knowing their limits and doing without what they want compared to what they only need. Story 150. Buying an expensive new car while renting a place to live. Gotta get the first starter home ASAP. With good credit, you can put down less than 5. Story 151. A normal money habit is that all the credit card lenders keep sending us more and more credit cards, causing people to have to claim bankruptcy or lose their house, a car, etc. Because of these lenders, more of the poor just dig a super big hole they can get out of. Story 152. Getting approved for a loan, whether a home, car, phone, etc., and believing that means you can afford it. It doesn't. It just means they want to open an account for you so they can earn the interest. The number of people I know who bought a house when they could definitely not afford it with their income level, or constantly buy cars brand new after just a few years, increasing their payments, seeming cause they're just bored with what they have. It blows my mind. And then they complain about their mortgage rate or their monthly car payment. Like, dude, you did this to yourself. Story 153. Treating yourself every time you feel slightly inconvenienced. I survived Monday. I deserve sushi and 3 pairs of shoes. Story 154. I don't want to make more money because it would put me in a higher tax bracket. People who don't understand how marginal tax brackets work. Story 155. Saving what's left as opposed to saving first and spending what's left. The first unexpected expense ruins you. Story 156. Spending money you shouldn't out of social obligation, weddings, birthdays, etc. You should never be afraid to just say, sorry, I'm broke, and save until you're stable before you start spending. If an unexpected expense would ruin you, anyone who pressures you into spending money on them is a piece of shit who doesn't care about you. Story 157. Gambling. Imagine putting money into something that you know is going to pay you back less than what you put into it. Story 158. I'm a pretty liberal-minded person who fully agrees that the upcoming generations have been dealt a shoot hand with economic opportunities afforded them as compared to the generations before. That said, the whole point of the avocado toast comment, which while flippantly glossing over the very real and very deep issues with the economy, was actually well made. In the face of economic challenges, regardless of whether or not they are fair, it absolutely makes a lot of sense to reduce elective spending. Fix your shoot, buy used, accept donations, make your own food, buy last year's video games, go to free civic events on the weekends, hike. It is not an opinion, but an observation that Gen Z and even millennials value spending money frivolously over saving and investing. As a statistical generalization, of course, it's bonkers. It's not fair that they can't get ahead as easily as we older generations could. We need to fix policies and recognize and address their hardships. We need to step down from leadership and let them step up. We need to implement policies that grow the middle class and stop rampant corporate bailouts and welfare that keep leaving the lower and middle classes holding the bag. All of that needs to happen. But unless and until it does, it's a dumb choice to get daily 6 coffee treats and other such service sector optional nonsense that remains glutted with Gen Z's dollars because they keep spending like they have savings when they do not. Story 159. Take a drive from Memphis south through Mississippi. The number of expensive pickups and muscle cars on the road there is insane. Those people are probably paying $800 in car payments alone, not to mention insurance, gas, and maintenance. A lot of those people probably live in trailer parks too. Story 160. Buying the latest trendy devices. I've seen people having perfectly working phones and smartwatches, but opt to upgrade yearly. Maybe because I grew up poor, but I believe if it ain't broken, no need to buy a new one. Lol. I can afford to buy the latest Samsung phone right now, but my S22 Ultra still works perfectly. Story 161. This is kind of a trick two-tone question. As many keep mentioning retirement, look at the scope of life. You're in your late stages, not physically capable of doing much. Were you more worried about money, or were you busy making memories? Life's short. Story 162. Normalizing a $600, $800 car payment, also eating out multiple times a week. A date night here and there or a 4 for $4 from Wendy's won't break the bank, but combine 3 to 5 Chipotle Domino SEC runs with a car payment that's $300, $500 more than it should be, and it can quickly become more than $1K a month, meaning you have to earn $1.2K to spend it. At $30 an hour, that's 40 hours of income. Story 163. Buying something new because you finished paying off the one you have. I see this all the time with cars and smartphones. Once it's paid off is when you really can get the value out of something. But many people think it's normal to have a monthly payment, so once they've paid it off, they figure it's time to get a new one. Story 164. Lifestyle creep. You get a raise and suddenly the little treats become monthly subscriptions, nicer restaurants, better clothes, and that one impulse Amazon thing every week. Nothing feels wrong, it's all small upgrades. But 5 years later, you're earning twice as much and somehow still living paycheck to paycheck. It doesn't feel like overspending, but it's passing by 1,000 comfortable cuts. Story 165. Monthly subscription fees. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. Next thing you know, half your money is sunk into subscription fees. Story 166. If you have buy something on sale because you can't afford it when it isn't on sale, then you can't afford it. I've seen so much financial hardship thanks to good deals. Story 167. Financing, whether it be appliances, vehicles, furniture, etc. The problem is that there's this justification about having 0 terms for so-and-so time, or having a low interest rate and making more off the stock market. Here's the bigger problem. It tricks you into buying things that are far more than you could afford or would have purchased in cash. This in turn causes you to live above your means, and before you know it, you are living paycheck to paycheck on payment plans. It's especially bad with the recent popularity of micro-purchase financing for basically anything. Story 168. Not putting enough money into their 401k. People vastly underfund their retirement for the now, while most likely at this rate we are going to find everyone has not planned enough. Those who just think putting 5 away is enough are going to be in for a bad time. Story 169. Owning a car really fudge a lot of people over. It's a huge expense that most people consider a necessity, which it is not. There are alternatives to owning a car, such as living closer to work, carpooling, public transportation, or biking walking. When the total cost of ownership is considered, purchase price, tax title, interest if financed, insurance, gas, parking, repairs, and maintenance, this can easily be $12K per year. Here's a study from OIA that says as much. You don't have to let me know if you manage to pay less. It's an average and you might be on the low end. Story 170. Auto loans, they price them out over 8 years so that by the time you pay it off, if you pay it off, you're already into a new vehicle. Story 171. Buying cheap item one times vs expensive item one time. Buying a low quality thing for cheaper and having to replace it multiple times rather than just biting the bullet and dropping a bit more money to purchase a higher quality item that will only be replaced at most once. In the moment, I get it. I also have the do I really need the 20 oven mitts when Dollarama sells them for $3.50 mindset, but good God, it's so not worth it in the long run. Story 172. Swiping a debit credit card versus using cash. Swiping a card doesn't sting as much as using hard money. Story 173. Credit card debt and buy now pay later. These options should only be used as an absolute emergency, and yet tons of people are paying others for the ability to pay more, but slower and over time. The ability to pay for a burrito with Klarna is a recession indicator. Story 174. Not paying off your credit cards before its due date. Carry a 0 balance on the allowable 20-day cycle. Story 175. Spending too much on food, drinks, and menial things under 20 compounded with not spending enough on larger purchases, going cheap on tires, shoes, batteries and chargers, home improvements, etc., just means you'll usually have to replace them faster or pay to maintain them. This is especially true for people who don't have any savings. Story 176. When a scheduled expense hits in a different month than expected, and they spend the spare money, even though the expenses definitely occur in the future. See it a fair bit in figure collecting. People don't do a rollover for their figure budget when pre-orders get delayed and instead spend the unspent money on in-stock items. Then they get themselves into a snowballing mess, leading to having to cancel a bunch of stuff or being broke.